the altarpieces, the panels of the altarpiece that you see were created by a small community called Sikri, which is not far from Lake Victoria in Kenya. It's in the province of Nyanza. And to give you an idea, Nyanza is probably the poorest part of Kenya, and it's also known as the AIDS capital of Kenya. It's the one area of the country where AIDS is not declining, it's still rising. And a lot of that has to do with the fishing culture around Lake Victoria, which is a big, long story that we won't go into right now. But like many rural communities, not just Kenya, but all of Africa, you have got people who have literally gone into decline, and it's because of the effect of the scourge of AIDS, which has decimated communities. And then in the 80s, these places were greatly affected by globalization. So when I arrived in Sikri, they have gone through roughly 20 to 25 years of this decline. And it has been learned that when people are like this for such a long period of time, you isolate yourself, and it's difficult to become engaged in life again. So it was my job to figure out, how can we do this? How can we bring a group of people so that they become engaged in life, so that they will participate and try to restore themselves? So I relied on the idea of altarpieces, which were created during the Middle Ages, during the time of the European plagues. And they were commissioned usually by monasteries who were caring for the sick and the dying. And the whole idea was to be able to recognize yourself in these gospel pictures and know that you are not the only one who has suffered, but if you look upon Christ on the cross, he suffered for you, how much greater his suffering was than yours. And then gradually, through the making of this altarpiece, people were able to start to renew themselves. And they were able to renew themselves because you're not going to talk about yourself and how you are hurting. You have to talk about issues. How are we going to place our story artistically? What colors should we use? And it becomes a non-threatening conversation. And gradually, you see people beginning to participate. When they begin, people are sitting in a straight row. They don't even look at each other. And gradually, they turn towards each other and start to work together. It's only the beginning of the journey, but it is the beginning. As Christ was alone in the Garden of Gethsemane, his apostles could not stay awake. They realized that in the end, it is you yourself who communicates with God. Your family can accompany you for so long, your friends can accompany you, but in the end, your decision is between you and God. The next one is the crucifixion. And in African communities, especially the rural ones, it is the women who are being crucified. They are the ones who are oppressed. They are the ones who have been left behind to care for their grandchildren because their offspring have died to AIDS. And that's why you see the women standing in front of the cross in that one. And thirdly, burials in rural Africa, especially in Kenya, the body is not buried in a cemetery like we have here. No matter where you were living, once you die, your body is taken back to your family compound. And that's what you see illustrated here. The 3 graves, probably the husband and the two children who have died to AIDS, and then you see the family is left to care for the young ones. That is the road to Emmaus. And you see Christ in the center, walking with 2 people from the community. As you can see, they have used a man and a woman. To the left of the center panel, you see residents, people of the community, following along the journey. And on the right-hand side, you see the school children. And that is the color of the school uniform for the children who go to the school in Sikri. And when I left them just about a year ago, we had 150 children in the school, many of whom were orphans, and many who also had AIDS themselves. And then the others that you see are all illustrations of the gospel narrative. The first one on your left over here, the woman at the well. And the well, of course, is an important part of any community's life. The women often spend many hours walking to the well to gather water for the day, taking the children along. Very quickly, they learn to carry a container of water on their head. And as in the gospel narrative, the well is the source of living water in Christ's story. It's where the women renew themselves in the community. They come to talk, they get cut in the news, as well as to get that drink of water that's so badly needed. And if we go to the ones behind over here, the first is the Nativity. And no matter how poor a family, the birth of a child is always hope for the community. And interestingly, while I was there, one of our teachers had a little girl, and they named her Judy. Following one is baptism, and instead of Christ being baptized, here you see a priest administering baptism in the community. The next one I find quite fascinating. It was a raising of Jairus' daughter. And what they have done is illustrated here. A medic comes to visit a woman who is dying, family members standing alongside, and you know that she's not going to come back to life. But if you look closely, seen rising from the bed is new life in Christ, and this is how they have illustrated it. And the last one over here, the biblical quote is, "Whatever you have done to the least of my brethren, you have done for me." And here you see a picture of a widow with an orphan grandchild following along behind and with their bowls. Oftentimes, for the children, meal will be served after the Sunday service, and the children would bring a bowl, a plastic dish, tin dish, to church so that they could have their maize and beans put into their bowl. The one out in the hallway, in the narthex, is fishing. And on that one, you also see the red ribbon for AIDS, because it is around the lake, unprotected sex, that AIDS is still being perpetuated. Women will go down to the water. The men are fishing at night, and they will buy fish and then take it back to sell it in the community or the local markets. And if you don't have money to buy the fish, you sell yourself. And unfortunately, that is what's happening. So this took them about 8 months to complete this, and it went from there to South Africa, where it was on display. It was on display in Cape Town at a pediatric conference. Doctors from all over Africa who are working with children with AIDS. It was on display there, and finally we got it here in Canada. It will go back to Kenya, it will go back to Sikri, and they are in the process of fundraising for their new church. If you look at the pictures along here, you'll see their present church with a rusty tin roof, and it's made of mud. The new one that they're building is going to be made of brick. It will be a permanent structure, and that is where these panels are going to hang. The one in front, the triangular one that you see, will go over the altar on the east wall, and the others will come down the two side walls, and this will be their story. And the other thing that's important about this is you now have got the community story for those children who have been orphaned, because their parents are not there to pass on family history. And as a grandmother, you do not pass on the same story that a mother passes on, but now they have got reference that they can discuss what happened in their own community history. You saw the first altarpiece that Wilfred and I did, you saw here back in 2010. And we had a frame made for it. It is mounted on its frame, and it is now on the east wall of their little church, St. Peter's. And it is cared for like you wouldn't believe, because it's very dirty and dusty, and sometimes the glass is not there, and the rain will come in. The women open this altarpiece up each Sunday, and then they close it up and they cover it with plastic. And this is part of the more Sunday ritual now, to care for this. The Diocese of Ottawa will receive donations, and the reason we're doing it is we cannot issue tax receipts yet because we don't have our number. So the diocese will receive a donation, and then from there it goes back to Kenya and will be used. This year's projects are water. We have identified 4 places where we want to install wells, and then you also need latrines. And this is what this year's donations will go towards.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.